Well, of course, free movement of workers within the European Union was part of the original deal. It was in the original Treaty of Rome back in the 1950s. So we knew when we joined in the early 70s that free movement was part of what the EU was about. But in practice, there wasn't that much free movement, and there wasn't that much European migration to the UK, or at least not that people noticed, until 2004. What happened in 2004, of course, was that 10 countries, most of them from the rather poor ex-communist countries of Central and Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, joined the EU. And quite large numbers of workers migrated from those countries, in particular from Poland and the Baltic states. There are now about 2.2 million workers who were born from somewhere else in the European Union working in the UK. So, not surprisingly, that's had quite a large impact on the UK labour market, on our economy, and indeed on our society. So it's not surprising that it's an issue. There's really basically no evidence to suggest that EU migrants are pushing British workers out of jobs. Of course, EU migrants take jobs, and indeed sometimes migrants take jobs which otherwise would have gone to a British worker. But they also create jobs. They create jobs directly because they're employers or business people or whatever, but actually more importantly, they create jobs indirectly because migrants, when they earn money, they spend money, so they add to the demand side of the economy as well. So what happens, and what the evidence shows has happened, is that while EU migrants have taken jobs, they've also resulted in the British economy being bigger, and hence there being more jobs overall. And overall that seems to balance out. So the impact on jobs for British workers seems to have been basically zero. Well, that depends on what arrangements we have with the rest of the EU after leaving and what migration policy we put in place. And there's a whole range of things that might happen. At one end of the spectrum, if we went for the Norwegian or Swiss model, for example, well, they still have freedom of movement. So if that happened, almost nothing would change. We'd still have the same level of migration. On the other end, if we chose not to have that and we ended free movement, which we would be free to do if we were outside the European Union, then we could put in place quite a different migration policy. And that could cut the number of migrants coming from within the EU quite significantly, perhaps by up to 100,000, some people estimate. Now that still wouldn't bring the numbers down to the Prime Minister's target of the tens of thousands, but it would be quite a substantial reduction.